Sarah Martinez had always been the class clown. In high school, she made everyone laugh with her silly jokes and funny faces. Her teachers would shake their heads when she cracked jokes during serious lessons. Her parents worried that she wasn't taking life seriously enough. "You need to grow up, Sarah," her mother would say with a sigh. Life isn't all fun and games. But Sarah didn't want to be serious. She loved making people smile. When someone was sad, she would tell a joke. When the cafeteria food was terrible, she would make funny comments that had everyone laughing instead of complaining. Her friends loved being around her because she always made even boring days feel exciting. After finishing school, Sarah tried different jobs. She worked at a coffee shop where she made customers laugh while serving their drinks. Then she tried working at an office, but her boss didn't appreciate her jokes during meetings. She even tried being a party entertainer for children's birthdays. The kids loved her, but the pay was very low. One day, while walking through the city center, Sarah saw a military recruitment booth. The soldiers standing there looked so serious and professional in their sharp uniforms. One of them, a tall woman with short hair, smiled at Sarah as she walked by. "Ever thought about serving your country?" the woman asked kindly. Sarah almost laughed out loud. Her, in the military? She could barely keep a serious face for 5 minutes. "I don't think I'm military material," she said, grinning. "I'm more of a joke teller than a soldier." The recruiter's eyes sparkled with interest. "Sometimes the best soldiers are the ones who can keep spirits up when times get tough. We need people who can bring hope and laughter to difficult situations." That night, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what the recruiter had said. She had always thought the military was only for serious, tough people. But maybe there was room for someone like her, too. Maybe making people laugh could actually be useful in ways she had never imagined. She decided to research more about military life. She read stories online about soldiers who used humor to help their teammates through hard times. She learned about how important morale was in the military, and how some of the best leaders were those who could make their troops feel better even in the worst situations. The more she read, the more interested she became. This could be her chance to use her natural gift for making people happy, in a way that actually mattered. It could be her chance to prove that being funny didn't mean she wasn't serious about helping others. 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself back at the recruitment center, ready to take the first step toward a completely different life than she had ever imagined for herself. Basic training was nothing like Sarah had expected. The drill sergeant, a stern man named Sergeant Thompson, seemed to have no sense of humor at all. On the first day, when Sarah tried to lighten the mood with a small joke about the early morning wake-up call, he made her do 50 push-ups. "This isn't a comedy club, Martinez," he shouted. "This is the military. People's lives depend on discipline and focus." Sarah quickly learned to keep her jokes to herself during official training, but she noticed something interesting. During break times, when the other recruits were tired and homesick, they would gather around her. She would quietly tell funny stories about their training experiences, and suddenly everyone felt better. There was Marcus, a shy boy from a small town who was terrified of everything. Sarah would whisper funny observations about their daily routines that made him smile despite his fears. There was Jennifer, a serious girl who missed her family terribly. Sarah's silly impressions of their instructors would make Jennifer forget her sadness for a while. Week after week, Sarah pushed herself harder than she ever had before. The physical training was exhausting. Learning to handle weapons was scary. Following strict rules was difficult for someone who had always been free-spirited. But every evening, when she saw how her humor helped her fellow recruits deal with their stress and fears, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Sergeant Thompson began to notice something too. Sarah's group had the highest morale of all the training units. They worked better as a team, supported each other more, and rarely had the emotional breakdowns that were common in other groups. He started watching Sarah more carefully. One evening, after a particularly tough day of combat training, Sarah found Marcus crying behind the barracks. He was ready to quit. "I can't do this," he sobbed. "I'm not strong enough. I don't belong here." Sarah sat down next to him. Instead of making a joke, she spoke seriously but kindly. "You know what I learned? Strength isn't about how many push-ups you can do. It's about showing up every day even when you're scared. You've been doing that for 8 weeks now. That makes you stronger than you think." Then she added with a small smile, "Besides, if they kicked out everyone who cried during training, this place would be empty. Even Sergeant Thompson probably cried on his first day. Can you imagine? All that shouting was probably just him practicing his tough voice in the mirror. Marcus laughed despite his tears. The next morning he was back in formation, ready to try again. Word began to spread among the instructors about Sarah's unusual leadership style. She was becoming the unofficial morale officer for her entire training group, helping everyone stay focused and motivated through the toughest parts of their military education. Graduation day arrived faster than Sarah had imagined. As she stood in her crisp military uniform, she barely recognized herself. The girl who used to make jokes in class was now a trained soldier. Her family came to watch the ceremony, and her mother's eyes filled with tears of pride. "I can't believe that's my daughter," her mother whispered to her father. "She looks so professional, so confident." After graduation, Sarah was assigned to Fort Harrison, a military base known for its challenging environment and high-stress missions. The base commander, Colonel Rivera, had specifically requested her after reading reports about her unique ability to maintain team morale. Sarah's first assignment was working with a unit that had been struggling with low spirits. They had recently returned from a difficult deployment where they had lost 2 team members. The soldiers were dealing with grief, anger, and fear about their next mission. Traditional counseling wasn't working, and the unit's performance was suffering. "I'm not sure what you can do that our trained counselors couldn't," said Captain Brooks, the unit leader, when Sarah arrived. "These men and women have been through real trauma. They don't need entertainment, they need healing." Sarah understood his skepticism. She had learned during training that there was a time for humor and a time for serious respect. "I'm not here to entertain them, sir," she replied. "I'm here to help them remember why they chose this life and why they're worth fighting for." She spent her first week just observing and listening. She attended their training sessions, ate meals with them, and heard their stories. She learned about the friends they had lost, the families they missed, and the fears they carried. She didn't try to make them laugh. Instead, she showed them that someone cared about their pain. Slowly, she began to share small moments of lightness, not jokes about their losses or fears, but gentle humor about everyday military life. She would point out funny things about their daily routines or share amusing stories from her own training days. She helped them see that it was okay to smile again, that laughing didn't mean they were forgetting their fallen comrades. One soldier, Corporal Davis, had been completely silent since losing his best friend in combat. He barely spoke to anyone and seemed to be disappearing inside himself. Sarah didn't try to force him to talk or laugh. Instead, she would sit quietly beside him during meals, occasionally sharing a gentle observation about the weather or the food. After 2 weeks, Corporal Davis finally spoke to her. "You know," he said quietly, "my friend Jake would have loved your story about the drill sergeant who was afraid of spiders. He always said that everyone's tough until they meet something that scares them. It was a small breakthrough, but it meant everything." Sarah realized that her gift wasn't just about making people laugh. It was about helping them find hope again, about showing them that life could still have light even after experiencing darkness. 6 months later, Sarah received news that would test everything she had learned. Her unit was being deployed to a conflict zone overseas. This wasn't training anymore. This was real danger, real responsibility, and real fear. The night before deployment, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she was making jokes at a coffee shop. Now she was preparing to serve in a war zone, responsible for keeping her team's spirits up when their lives would be on the line. The flight to the base overseas was long and quiet. Unlike her cheerful training days, everyone was serious now. Sarah could see the worry in her teammates' faces. Some were going into combat for the first time. Others were returning to a place that held difficult memories. When they arrived at the forward operating base, the reality hit hard. The living conditions were rough. The heat was unbearable. The constant threat of attacks made everyone tense and jumpy. Sarah realized that her real test was just beginning. The base commander, Major Wilson, called Sarah into his office on their second day. "Martinez, I've heard about your work back at Fort Harrison. I need you to understand something. This isn't a training exercise. These soldiers are facing life and death situations every day. Their mental state directly affects their survival and the survival of their teammates." Sarah nodded seriously. "I understand, sir. I'm not here to tell jokes. I'm here to help them stay human in an inhuman situation. Her first real challenge came during a week when the base was under constant threat of attack. Nobody had slept properly for days. Tempers were short, fear was high, and the unit was starting to fall apart. Arguments broke out over small things. Some soldiers were so anxious they could barely function. Instead of trying to make everyone laugh, Sarah focused on the basics. She organized simple activities that helped people feel normal again. She started a letter-writing session where soldiers could write to their families. She created a small space where people could share photos from home and tell stories about better times. When Sergeant Kim broke down crying because he missed his daughter's birthday, Sarah didn't make a joke. She sat with him and helped him record a video message for his little girl. When Private Johnson couldn't eat because he was so worried about an upcoming mission, Sarah made sure he had someone to talk to and didn't let him face his fears alone. One evening, during a brief quiet moment, Sarah gathered a small group around her. She didn't tell jokes, but she shared a story about her grandmother, who had lived through a war as a child. My grandmother told me that during the worst times, people survived by remembering the small, beautiful things. The taste of fresh bread, the sound of children laughing, the feeling of sunshine on their faces. She said that hope isn't about big dramatic moments. It's about holding on to those tiny pieces of goodness even when everything else is falling apart. The soldiers listened quietly, and Sarah could see something change in their faces. They started sharing their own small, beautiful memories. Marcus talked about his mother's apple pie. Jennifer described her dog's silly tricks. Even the toughest soldiers opened up about simple things that brought them joy. When Sarah returned home after her deployment, she was no longer the same person who had walked into that recruitment center 3 years earlier. The young woman who had only known how to make people laugh had become a decorated soldier who understood that true leadership meant much more than just keeping spirits up. The homecoming ceremony was overwhelming. Sarah's family was there, along with local news reporters who had heard about her heroic mission. Her old friends from high school barely recognized the confident, composed woman in the military uniform. "Is that really Sarah?" whispered her former classmate Amy. "She looks so different, so important." But the biggest change wasn't in how Sarah looked. It was in how she understood her purpose. She had learned that her gift for connecting with people wasn't just about entertainment. It was a powerful tool for leadership, healing, and bringing hope to the darkest situations. 3 months after returning home, Sarah received unexpected news. She was being promoted to lieutenant and offered a position as a training instructor at the military academy. Her job would be teaching future officers about the importance of emotional intelligence, team building, and maintaining morale under pressure. On her first day as an instructor, Sarah stood before a classroom full of eager young cadets. They looked so similar to how she had looked years ago, uncertain, nervous, trying to figure out if they belonged in the military. "Who can tell me what makes a good leader?" Sarah asked the class. Hands shot up with the expected answers. "Strength. Discipline. Strategic thinking. Courage." Sarah nodded approvingly. "All excellent answers. But let me ask you something else. How many of you have ever been in a situation where someone made you feel better just by being there? Where someone helped you believe in yourself when you wanted to give up?" The room grew quiet as the cadets thought about her question. "Leadership isn't just about giving orders or being the strongest person in the room," Sarah continued. "Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is help others find their own strength. Sometimes it's making someone laugh when they're scared. Sometimes it's sitting quietly with someone who's grieving. And sometimes it's showing a frightened child that they're safe." She told them about her journey from class clown to decorated soldier, about Marcus and his fears, about Corporal Davis and his grief, and about the little girl with the stuffed bear. She explained how she had learned that humor, empathy, and human connection weren't signs of weakness in the military. They were essential tools for mission success. "Your job as future officers isn't just to be tough," she said. "It's to bring out the best in everyone under your command, to help them be brave when they're scared, hopeful when they're discouraged, and united when they feel alone." As the semester progressed, Sarah's classes became the most popular at the academy. Her students learned practical leadership skills, but more importantly, they learned to see their role as servants of the people they would lead. Years later, officers trained by Sarah could be found all over the military. Known for their exceptional ability to build strong, loyal teams, they understood that real strength came from lifting others up, not putting them down. Sarah had discovered something that many people never learn, that the things that make you different, even the things others might see as weaknesses, can become your greatest strengths when you learn how to use them in service of others. The girl who was once laughed at for making jokes was now respected throughout the military as one of the finest leaders of her generation. She had proven that there are many ways to serve your country, and that sometimes the most important battles are won not with weapons, but with wisdom, compassion, and the simple but powerful act of helping others believe in themselves.